Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Have your
Welcome.
notes?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this next panel, a reality check on labour migration, perspectives from the private sector. I'm Jennifer Tangney. I'm a senior project manager in ICMPD, based in our Brussels office. And it's my pleasure to be here to cast some light on some of the challenges that the private sector are facing, where hopefully we do have some solutions to offer. There are initiatives, there are examples of good practice. I think it's very clear that employers face challenges in securing the labour that they need, both from a bureaucratic perspective, from high costs that they face. But I think there's an additional challenge if you're an SME. It's a very unique context, and at the moment, those that are leading on the European side in securing talent tends to be more big business. For an SME, there are very different bridges that need to be built in order for them to be able to secure the labour that they need. And very importantly, after securing this labour, maybe waiting 9 months to get a pathway, identifying the talent, they need to retain it. And that means that SMEs need different skills now than they did before. They not only need to run their business, not only need to find their markets, but they also need to internationalize and develop the skills that they need to integrate and to rely on the public services and the social infrastructure around them to help a supportive environment that enables them to retain talent. And I think this challenge is even more great if you are from maybe a more peripheral country, or if you are from a country where there's a less established migration experience. And in these days of polarization on migration, I think we all have a role to play in really being careful with the narratives that we use so that the context for migrants is welcoming. We need them, and our businesses are looking for labour to fill their vacancies. We're in very good hands on this panel. We have some leading experts to share their experience with us. I'm joined today by Antoons, an attorney and partner of Fragomen's Brussels office. She leads government strategies and advisory services for Europe and sits on the European Commission expert group on economic migration. We also have the pleasure today of being joined by Bianka Debussche Valkovicova, who is a policy coordinator for legal migration at the Directorate-General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the European Commission. And she has been instrumental in coordinating initiatives related to legal migration policies. And last but not least, we have Lucja Kalkstein, who is the co-founder and group vice president at Eryk, an international provider of electrical and mechanical services, as well as remote IT solutions. So welcome to you all, and thank you for being with us. Jo, I'm going to come to you first. What are your thoughts on the current global talent attraction and recruitment landscape, especially if we consider the challenges being faced by small and medium-sized enterprises, and how do their experiences compare to those of bigger business, and what are some of the strategies from big business that could translate for SMEs? So, a very easy question to get you started.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure being here. Well, it's a very complex question, and being here as a lawyer, voice of the private sector, I'm going to focus mainly on what we call the legal pathways. We have discussed at length yesterday as well, demographic challenges, labor shortages, specific sectors where we have those labor shortages. We looked at numbers, very high numbers. If you look at, for example, the medical sector, how many healthcare professionals we need in Europe, about 2 million. ICT, by 2030, we need about 20 million ICT professionals. So if you look at all this and then combined with what was said yesterday, you have the shortage occupations, but you also have those really bottleneck functions. It's clear that, it's difficult to find the right talent. And I know, Bianka, you're going into detail about what was said in the Eurobarometer. But if you look at the SMEs overall, you know, it was stated that more than 75% of the SMEs found it very or moderately difficult to find the right talent. And I know we can talk about, and that's key, reskilling, upskilling, you know, technology, AI, you know, to fill and make sure that they can have the necessary, I would say, solutions to address their needs. But in the end, we all know that labor migration is and must be part of those solutions. And I like the idea of what has, I mean, yesterday, today, we all talk about all those initiatives of talent partnerships, multilateral, bilateral. We have those legal pathways. But if you look at it, you know, from a practitioner point of view, I mean, having, you know, programs that facilitate, that promote legal migration doesn't mean that we have the legal pathways. And you see a map here, and don't take the map as you know, black on white, you know, I would say score of your country. But what we have tried to do here is compare, I would say, the European countries, one to each other based on more than 50 data points with respect to the openness of their migration system. And that means, is there a pathway available for those, I would say, foreign talent nationals to come and fill the vacancies of the SMEs? And if you look at this, I mean, just the first question is there an available pathway? And we all know, based on, as well, European legislation, we have the EU Blue Card scheme or national schemes to attract and employ highly skilled foreign nationals. But we don't have necessarily those pathways for, I would say, you know, the medium-skilled, the lower-skilled workers. If I look at, and I was last week and together with Bianka at the contact group of, you know, labor migration, where we had representatives of all the member states, and we discussed, you know, the labor market testing. It was really shocking to me. It was shocking to me that, you know, for those, a lot of occupations, you need to go through the labor market testing. It's outdated. You need to post, you know, your job vacancy on different platforms, even in publish in some newspapers. You have to wait 2 months. Then a candidate might be identified after 2 months, and then you have to justify yourself as an employer why you don't take that candidate. And this is just one example of saying, I mean, do we have necessarily all those immigration pathways to support those talent partnerships and to say we're going to train up people with these and these skills, but if those people have to go through that labor market testing, if, for example, and I will talk about it, if they have to wait, you know, for 6 months in their home country, and we know they can be trained up maybe meanwhile, but often you can't start the procedures consecutively. You first need your qualification before you can start applying for your single combined work and residence permit. So it takes a long time. We had, last week, I had the question about, is it normal that it takes me 2 months to secure an appointment with the consular post in the home jurisdiction? Yes, it's normal. And then we're not talking about the processing times in country of a single permit. And just a couple of examples. And if we then look at the small and medium-sized companies, the fees, the government fees often, you know, associated with processing can be high. Salary thresholds. Some salary thresholds are higher than the pay you're due to pay to someone according to collective labor agreements to a national of that country. And certainly when you look at young graduates, we have a lot of SMEs, they say we can't, on the one hand, afford those payments. On the other hand, we can't justify, you know, a different treatment between one national compared to another national. So these are just a couple of examples to show how difficult it is. And if we go to the next slide, it's just a slide, you know, to show you. I mean, we know we have the single permit, and now there has been the recast of the single permit, reducing government lead times to 3 months. But often labor market testing needs to happen before you can apply for your single permit. Your time it takes at the consular post is not included, so it can take 6 months or longer to have the right candidate on the ground in the host jurisdiction. We see we have a couple of fast-track pathways in Europe, mainly focused on specific categories like highly skilled ICT researchers, but not necessarily on those medium skilled. We see countries developing, and I'm a big fan of it, of those, you know, recognized sponsorship, you know, trusted partnerships with the governments, meaning that you as a company, you enter into an agreement with the government saying, you can count on me. I will ensure that I'm compliant, that I procure the necessary permits, that I pay, you know, the required salaries. And in return, you know, I will do, you know, whatever is required, but in return, I receive, you know, expedited processing, document, you know, maybe relaxation of documents requirement. But if you then look at the SMEs, there is a fee associated. Is it worthwhile, you know, to go for that recognized sponsorship if you have a couple of vacancies? It's different compared to a multinational. You go through a due diligence process, for financial statements, you know, as an SME, it's not all obvious. So in the end, you know, there are a lot of very good initiatives, but they're not necessarily transferable to SMEs. And then you can't forget, you know, if you have those multinationals, and I can just also tell you, multinationals face as well those problems. Maybe, I mean, you know, SMEs, it's really difficult, but for multinationals, it's equally difficult. But they have, of course, the benefit of, for example, having an, you know, workforce planning, the benefits of scale. Okay, they probably have, and they often have, you know, a talent pool that they can use to address immediate needs. They have, for example, you know, a company of the multinational group based in the home location of the individual that can hire the individual and employ the individual in the interim while the single permit is processed. They can, for example, look and take lawyers to look at remote working and what is the implications of remote working. They have, for example, to bind them, you know, they build rotational graduate programs. You see, there are a lot of things happening, but unfortunately, it's not necessarily immediately transferable for SMEs. And I can talk later on what we can do towards SMEs, but there is work to be undertaken.
Thank you very much, Jo. Yes, it seems like we need to modernize some of our EU systems, digitize, modernize, reduce costs, and really look at how we can facilitate access for SMEs, which is a very good segue to you, Bianca. The EU has launched several ambitious initiatives to boost talent attractiveness for skilled workers, such as the revision of the Blue Card Initiative, this planned online job seeker employer matching initiative through the talent pool, and of course the talent partnerships that we heard about also in the previous panel, which is really an initiative that is designed to facilitate the identification of skills, the recognition of skills, and this triple win for the migrant, for the country of origin, and the country of destination. I think it's fair to say that within the European Commission there is recognition that European employers need support to access and retain the labour that they need. Maybe it's a recognition that is coming a little bit later than it should. Perhaps you can tell us first and foremost, what is the role of DG Employment in this regard? What are your plans? And especially if you could consider smaller employers in countries with less experience of migration.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I wish you a good morning to all of you. I'm honored to be here today. As you mentioned, I work at the Directorate-General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. And for those that are not so well versed in the internal commission setup, I would just briefly explain that we support the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. We also contribute to the skills and integration policies, and we cooperate with other commission services on the labor market integration of third country nationals. I think that Jo has already provided the diagnostic, and we are more or less on the same line. One of the recent reports of EU agencies has shown that up to 80% of small and medium-sized enterprises are struggling to find the skilled workforce that they need. And more than half of those that have tried are reporting difficulties hiring from outside the EU. The former Prime Minister's Draghi report on competitiveness of Europe has further underlined this link between the lack of skilled workforce and the inability of European enterprises to thrive, to scale up, and also to meet the ambitious goals that we have on the green and digital transitions. The Commission has recently adopted an action plan to tackle labor and skills shortages to provide some kind of a comprehensive response to this multifaceted problem. And the first and foremost, we need to activate the workforce that is already in the EU. And that means bringing vulnerable groups to the labor market, such as young parents with children, persons with disabilities, persons with migrant background, or the young that are not in employment, education, or training. We also need to continue improving working conditions, because this can be a significant barrier for those that are looking for adequate job quality. Furthermore, we need to continue upskilling and reskilling those that are either already in the workforce, but also those that are still trying to reach the labor market. And fair intra-mobility is also an important part of the puzzle, of the solution. However, as Jo mentioned, the scale of the problem is such that we need also legal migration to kind of cover the gaps at the labor market. Recently, Commission has adopted the legislative proposal for the EU talent pool that you have already mentioned. And I would just like to highlight a couple of aspects that are kind of relevant for the small and medium-sized enterprises and for the smaller member states. But first and foremost, the talent pool is supposed to be a matching platform that is supposed to make the recruitment faster and easier for the enterprises by providing a match between the job seeker from outside the EU and the employer that is looking for skilled workforce in EU-wide shortage occupations. And I must underline that this will be at all skills levels. So we talk a lot about high-skilled workers, but also the low and medium-skilled workers are needed, and many of the shortages are particularly in this type of occupations. The platform will provide also information on recruitment, immigration procedures, and on the living and working conditions in the member states, which is particularly important for the smaller enterprises that might struggle to find the information that they need. For the smaller member states and the member states that have less visibility worldwide, this type of platform can provide the economies of scale. Because as we know, the EU as a whole is more attractive to the outside world as just the sum of its individual member states. We have also mentioned the talent partnerships, I think, a lot this morning and also yesterday, so I will not dwell too much on it, but the talent pool will also provide effective job placements for the talent partnerships, and the important aspect from the recruitment perspective is that the social partners and employers are involved in identifying the sectors that are mutually beneficial for the partner country and the EU member states. What I hear as kind of preliminary positive feedback is that the process takes into account the whole trajectory of the job seeker, and often we hear that the simple match is not enough, that also some kind of a post-arrival assistance until the job seeker integrates the workforce is necessary. I have talked about attracting skilled workforce, but we also need to activate the potential of third country nationals that are already in the EU. And when we look at statistics, we see that the employment rates are unfortunately lower than for those for EU citizens. But those third country nationals that are employed in the EU, 40% of them are overqualified for the jobs that they perform, which is a terrible brain waste. What we see from the experience, for instance, of integrating Ukrainian refugees at the EU labor market is that some kind of a comprehensive package approach seems to yield the best results. And this means not only cooperation with the public employment services, work-based learning, language training at the job, mentorship. This seems to yield kind of the best results. To conclude, the labor and skill shortages are clearly an issue. It is no wonder that in 2022, shortage was the word of the year. And we need to provide a comprehensive response to tackle this issue, starting with activating the workforce in the EU. But when we decide to recruit from abroad, we must ensure that economies of scale are at the forefront of our minds and that we provide support to employers even after the match is done.
Great, thank you. A very brief follow-up question. What is the timeline for the talent pool?
So the talent pool is, the general approach has been reached in the Council in June this year, and now we are waiting for the European Parliament to restart the negotiations. We are ready and looking forward to it, so hopefully at some point in 2025 this should kind of come to a conclusion, and then we need some time to make it operational, to prepare the IT platform and all the underlying kind of structures for it. So we still have some time to go, but we are very keen on it.
Thank you. Lucja, over to you, please. Established 20 years ago, Eryk has evolved into an international technical service provider in industry and automation, building installations, energy and renewables, with operations now in over 45 countries. As you have navigated this global journey, particularly in response to a shortage of workers, what insights have you gained from your focus on securing talent from Africa and Nigeria in particular?
Thank you very much for a chance to share our experience. It's, as you will hear, a lot of these lessons and obstacles we faced were not necessarily related to the policy, but it's, well, from the beginning. I mean, we are a service organization, which means skilled and motivated people is the essence of our business. Without that, we have no business, we cannot offer anything. And we have been aware of demographic trends and trends in the labor market for quite many years. We have searched in Europe. We have been in many countries investigating Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, south of Europe. And it was not quite an answer, as we could see in the longer run. It could be a solution in the short run, but we managed in the short run still. And Nigeria came a little bit by coincidence because we participated in a state visit there. But quickly we found that it is the right place to be, or at least a place to try. What we found in Nigeria, firstly, it is a vast pool of talent. Vast. I mean, Nigeria is 220 million people and growing, very young population. The level of education is relatively good. What we were looking for were technicians. We are looking for skilled electricians, and we were interested in young people with good theoretical background, whom we could take to Europe and train on the job in our organization. Because theoretical electricity is the same for the profession all over the world. However, the standards of our work, how you do particular things, they are very different. The quality, the behavior, well, all these things. And our conclusion, well, we embark on this process somehow 2018-19, we had the first apprentices. Today, after about 5 years, we are over 30 Nigerians and Ghanaians also in our organization. So it's, in short, as we see it, it is very difficult for an SME, but it has great potential, and I believe that the time for Africa is now to go there. As I said, it is a lot of work. It is a smaller organization, it is enormous. Especially as we started two things at the same time. I mean, we started employing Africans, and we started employing apprentices. We started apprenticeship program at the same time. There are two difficult things for our organization, each of them, and we did both, but so it was double work, and well, today we cannot say which was more difficult. We already had English as a corporate language, which made things easier. Language of communication with customers, language for management, for team managers, for team leaders on the site. So this we had established. We didn't have to go through the hurdle of language lessons and adjusting documentation. What is extremely important, and we had to do right, it's preparing in advance and doing right the training on the job. The training program, which has to be externalized, we cannot say just, oh, they come and they will learn somehow. The onboarding process for candidates, and also to familiarize our own staff with the situation, procedures, and changes. And another big hurdle that we were not quite aware was procedures, regulations, immigration procedures. And it is actually not the regulations so much, because they are cumbersome. It's a pile of documentation, applying for work permits, applying for visa, and so forth. But we can prepare for that, learn it, and this is doable. What we were not prepared for was enormously long processing times, exceeding many times what was regulatory, what was set by law. And well, either the consulate or authorities, they said, well, we are overworked, we have no resources, nothing can be done. And it can really completely disturb the process. Something that we were prepared for, we expected resistance within our own organization. Well, if you introduce changes, there's always some resistance. If you introduce strangers, there is resistance, but also on the part of our partners, of our customers, who at first said they don't want to see any Africans, or they don't want to have any apprentices unqualified on the project, they just want the top staff. So you just have to stay put, insist, keep your track, and explain, and say that is the way and there is no other way. With customers, another pricing strategy helps. If they can get, well, less skilled young electrician cheaper, they become more open. Another thing is, well, in Africa, you really have to treat carefully, because coming as a European, things are not always what they seem to be. You get the candidates for whom getting this job and going to Europe, it's a life-changing event for them and their families. So they will tell you anything you want to hear at the job interview. So you have to be aware of that, what people tell you. And so later, when working with them, Africans very often will tell what they believe is polite or right, not what they really say. And we take it at face value, and that is often a mistake. And also the family and tribal bonds between our workers and their family and their tribe. they are of enormous importance. They are more important than the job relation, than any other relation. This is where loyalty naturally is. And it makes sense. You just have to be aware of that and take it into account when dealing with these employees. There are more of such differences, cultural and otherwise. I like to quote often that at first, our electricians, our technicians complained about the newcomers, saying, they can't even walk fast. When we go somewhere, they walk so slowly. Because of course, in hot countries, you move more slowly. This is the pace you take. And it's, so they were annoyed about such small, funny things. So taking on such a project was a huge effort for our company. It was a big investment of time and resources. But, and this is a long-term project. But I believe that it will be a long-term success. We are already very satisfied with this project. We have over 30 skilled and very good technicians. Really very good, many of them. Some are middling, but some are among the top performers. So we are approaching about 10% of our technical staff. Let's see what will happen when it is a bigger share, like 20%? Well, we haven't done it here. And, but I believe it gives us a competitive advantage in the longer run. I mean, this is still for a smaller technical European company, a blue ocean. I mean, somewhere where our competitors haven't been yet. And it's, and the last thing, also the lesson when going such places, it is really very helpful to find good local partners. Our partners was very much the trade mission, the General Consulate of Denmark in Lagos, with excellent service, very supportive, from recruitment, arranging meetings, and then later ICMPD, with whom we did a pilot project, Tech Pro for Europe. ICMPD was very helpful with doing a background check of the candidates. As I say, you really have to double check everything they say and present, and adding credibility wherever we showed up, and we could show the logo of ICMPD, we are doing it together. It helped us to be treated quite differently. Plus, of course, some practical advice and help down on ground.
Great, thank you very much, and it's good to hear that the Migration Partnership Facility support in Nigeria through ICMPD was useful. And maybe just to also highlight that we're talking a lot at the moment about the delays on the European side, but there's a huge cost and burden on the candidates themselves in terms of getting their qualifications in order, in terms of getting their security clearances, other things in their own home country. And there's a whole bureaucracy and machine there that is also cumbersome, time-consuming and costly before the migrant can even start the process to be entertained as a candidate. So I think it's not only to say that on the EU side we need some modernization and some agility. Also in the partner countries, we need to make it easier for an individual to be a candidate so that they can take a legal and regular pathway. Round two, and back to you, Jo. What do SMEs need to be successful in the global talent attraction and retention landscape? So maybe a little bit more of a focus on where you think changes can be made.
Okay. So let me pick up some of the points that have been raised here. For example, when we talk about the EU talent pool, we all look forward to the EU talent pool, but one thing you mentioned was about, making sure that there is information available on the legal pathways linked to the EU talent pool. Now, it's really important to understand that these days, you know, having a website with what are, you know, the legal pathways in the member states, what documents are needed, is not sufficient in order to help SMEs to run through the process. It's really important, you know, when we have help desks for SMEs, it's really about how does this work in practice. I have identified an individual in this country with these qualifications, you know, with this family status. What do I need to do? Where can I procure those documents? So it's really about, you know, almost looking at individual circumstances to then identify what is needed and how can we help you as an SME to run through the process. Secondly, so help desk could be an ID, Gen AI, you know, that you look at how, based on the information that you have, that you can easily look at what is applicable in your situation. Secondly, what you were referring to, both of you, very important is as well, it's not only about the individual, the principal itself, but the family. And we see a lot of SMEs coming to us worried about the welcoming of the family, the retention, the work status of the family. Can the family come? So I think we see some really good initiatives in member states about, you know, welcoming desks, houses, to facilitate the integration, but it's really important to focus on that one as well. Another point that I would like to highlight is when we work, for example, on the TAM project with SMEs, it's, you know, that at the outset that you involve the public sector in when you build those talent partnerships. What are the skills needed? And make sure that they are on board, that they can help you identify what they need, so that you are not, because we see, and we said yesterday, I mean, we need scalability, you know, these are still pilot projects. How can we get them up to speed? Well, the involvement of the private sector at the outset is really important. And not only the private sector, but also I remember that we had a discussion with a lady that was involved in a talent partnership in a certain member state that has said, you know, and then the filings are taking place, and the civil servant dealing with the application was even not aware that that was an application that was filed within the framework of that talent partnership. So involve making sure that you have, you know, private sector, your civil immigration professionals, you know, civil servants, that they all are part of that same program that smoothen in the end, you know, the actual delivery of the necessary permits. And then one thing that I also would like to highlight is when we talk about the EU talent pool, also making sure that we have a specific focus on SMEs. I mean, there will be a vetting procedure for employers for the EU talent pool. Is that equally accessible to SMEs? To what extent? That we look at, if we look at the shortage occupation list, is it only a shortage occupation list? Will we look at other types of bottleneck functions? So just a couple of comments to make sure that the initiatives we take at EU level, that they equally, you know, provide the necessary benefits for the SMEs. And one thing that I also would like to say to everyone in the audience, I know that we have not necessarily these days today all your representatives of the Ministry of Interior or Home Affairs or Immigration, but it's really very important when we want to be successful to bring those to the table and re-look at what are our immigration systems, how do they work, how complex are they, to make sure that whatever we develop, that it's, suit for purpose.
Thank you very much. Lucja, I'm going to come to you next with my follow-up question. What advice would you give to other organizations who are maybe starting this journey, and where would you see the most important areas for them to focus?
I think I have mentioned some of them at the beginning, saying, well, but again, I would repeat, prepare for long-term investment. I don't see such a program as a quick fix. I wouldn't recommend it as, it's not worth, as a quick source of cheap labor. It's maybe for some companies, but for middle-skilled companies, if you look at anybody with talent, where you need a motivation, when you need organization to work together, some interaction, then it is a long-term investment. With this initial investment in training, in preparing your organization, in finding out a lot of things. One of the things we found out quite quickly, it is importance of recruiting the right people. I mean, not only confirming that they have qualifications, but that they fit the profile. At the beginning, we recruited both young candidates and also some very experienced, very competent technicians, but they came already having some professional status in the countries, and they were recruited to an apprenticeship program where you really start from the bottom. And they came back to the countries quite quickly. They were excellent, but they wouldn't fit. And the job still was interesting because it's better money, it was in Europe, but it didn't work. So be sure you have the right people. And this about not getting overqualified candidates, it counts also for developing countries. Yeah. I would strongly advise to provide your newcoming workers with all practical basic things. Take care of their housing. Make sure that somebody will go with them to the migration office, all the places at the beginning. They will find out. And when you already have a group, they will support each other. But especially the first group, find out everything. We rent apartments for our employees, which they pay, but we arrange it, and they can change it later. When they have worked for a while, they have network, they know the town, they are free to change, but when they arrive, they have everything. They have transfer from the airport, they are taken to the apartment, they are explained the basic practical things, because we even had some young kids who came from a village where they didn't have running water at home, and they had to find out what is the dishwasher and other things. They learn very quickly. You have to, with some of them, you have to teach them that once they have unlimited data on the mobile, it's not a good idea to stay online until 4 o'clock in the morning when you have to go to work at 7. And sometimes it's working like with kids, and these things may happen, and it's better to put a little bit more effort. Then it's the question of retention. We are still early in the process, just 5 years, but have to start thinking about what's next. At first, we would be perhaps tempted to think that it is such a big jump in life quality and opportunities for people from Nigeria that they will be happy with it. And they are for a while. But once they made the first big leap, they are ready to take the next one. So they will not be happy with what we offer at the beginning for forever, and not even for very long. And so we have to prepare and ensure a clear career path. Like for our European workers, the same, no worse, or even perhaps better. And also very important what it is, in case of Africans, they have this colonial past still under their skin. So they are very sensitive about not being treated differently or worse than the European colleagues. And I think it is very important. It's easy to overstep the line even in good intention. So this still weighs very much.
Thank you very much. I think some very important points on the soft skills, ensuring the fit, and also on cultural awareness and creating the supportive environment. We've also seen in other projects, in the pilot projects that ICMPD is working on. We have seen that actually the infrastructure around the new arrivals is extremely important. It's not always easy for someone who looks different, who sounds different, who doesn't have a long track record of a bank account in Europe to go and find their own accommodation. So there are some fundamental steps that employers need to take into account. So Bianca, having heard about these challenges faced by SMEs as well as global corporations, what homework lies ahead for the European Commission, your Directorate-General, but also for the member states? If we look maybe at the next 5 years.
So in the next 2-3 weeks, the new Commission for the 2024-2029 period will be undergoing hearings in the European Parliament. But the political guidelines that are already published are clear in that the legal migration to respond to the skills needs of our regions, our economy is a priority. And we see that the labor market integration of third country nationals is not only in the mission letter of the traditionally Commissioner for the Internal Affairs and Migration, but it's also featured prominently in the mission letter for the Executive Vice President designate Roxana Minzatu, that will be in charge of people skills and preparedness. When we look at the for instance, OECD talent attractiveness indicator. We can see that the EU, despite having very good standard of living, is not as attractive as some of the other OECD members, such as the US, Canada, New Zealand, or Australia. And of course, partly it can be explained by the language, but the recognition of qualifications is also an important bottleneck. The processes for recognition of qualifications of third country nationals in the EU are very burdensome, and they can be also costly and time-consuming. And there is at the moment limited pooling of resources to support also employers in understanding and validating the qualifications and the skills of the third country nationals. And the employers, they can hesitate to recruit abroad because how do they know if the person being recruited is any good at what they are doing? So the reality of the labor market calls for skills-first approach, which means not only focusing on the qualifications, but also understanding and validating the skills and other demonstrable experiences that the persons are bringing along with them. So for the next 5 years, kind of the policy framework that we are looking at is the so-called Union of Skills, which means that the EU should be seen as a single pool of skills where all skills are validated, are understood and assessed, irrespective of where or how they were acquired. And this requires us also to focus on the persons coming from third countries. When it comes to the administrative burden related to the international recruitment, it was mentioned in relation to the SMEs. The Commission has adopted the Skills and Talent Mobility Package last year, and in this package we have underlined that the labor market tests, although instrumental to uphold the principle of union preference, should not impose excessive administrative burden on the employer and on the third country national, that the information on their functioning should be readily available, and that they should not impose an additional excessive cost on the employers. And we hear that some member states are already introducing some exemptions to the labor market test, particularly for those occupations that are in shortages in the member states. When it comes to third country nationals, I just want to say that the job contract is not all, right? We also need to look further into the integration process, and as a migrant myself, I understand that how difficult it is to uproot yourself and to come to a foreign country, often with your family, and start from scratch. For many of these persons, this can be quite difficult. That is why we need to continue our work on the integration and inclusion. We have in place the action plan for integration and inclusion that is currently undergoing a midterm review. And from our side, from DG Employment side, we also have the European Social Fund Plus that has programmed 1.4 billion euros for the upcoming years for the socioeconomic integration of third country nationals and also their labor market integration. To conclude, I wanted to say that there is not one tool, one fund, or one country that can tackle this challenge alone. We really need this multi-stakeholder approach to work together. And the European Commission is cooperating with social partners, for instance, through the existing platform of European Partnership on Integration. And we also try to improve the coordination between the migration and employment authorities through the labor migration platform. So for the future, we really need to make sure that this kind of multi-stakeholder cooperation continues to develop also with the local authorities and with the employers, of course.
Great, thank you very much. We have still a little bit of time in case there would be any question from the floor. I see one hand over here, and I see one hand at the very back of the room. Please do stand and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. My name is Ulan Nogoybaev. I'm the head of the Secretariat at the Migration and Human Trafficking Council in Kyrgyzstan. Thank you for raising up this question. And as a first speaker emphasized in her speech, this is not normal to wait 2 months. You are lucky if you wait for 2 months. I give you another number, another statistics, 6 to 9 months. In our case of Kyrgyzstan. Our private employment agencies, they're doing great. And one of the biggest companies in Central Asia and Kyrgyzstan, having in its roster more than 3,000 people waiting for almost 1 year. Sometimes the consulate doesn't work for a few months, and there is a big line. We almost had the social explosion this summer because of this kind of work of some of the consulates. I don't know, I don't want to name the country. Yeah, maybe I should. Poland, okay, Poland. Yeah, 6 to 9 months, yeah. They didn't work for 3 months, and we almost had the social explosion. We see the inconsistency in the migration policy between the private business. I mean, we have our partners crying in Warsaw, please, please send us, yes. And we have the consulate not working for a few months, and we have the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy breeds illegal migration. Guess what happens? People terminate the contract. The private business has to pay because they didn't fulfill the obligations of these contracts. So these people who terminate the contracts, they go illegal way. Guess where they are right now? They're here in Europe, yes. I mean, they don't want to wait for 9 months and 1 year. And then if you're lucky, you may get something. I mean, you may get your visa. Yeah, that's another thing. And there is another issue with the skills. Many of those in that list that I just mentioned, like 3,000 labor migrants, potential candidates, they well-skilled. They came from Russia, many of them, most of them. Since the beginning of the war, yeah, we see the diversification of labor force routes from Russia to Western Europe, almost said Western Union, then US. They're looking for better opportunities, yes. But they want to go legal way. But since we have this kind of bureaucracy, we provide better opportunities not for labor migrants, but for smugglers and traffickers. And this is the challenge we're facing right now in Europe. Kyrgyzstan, yeah, works over this problem. So it was a question, it was a comment, and please do something in Brussels and Vienna. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I think it's been a clear message that consular services and digitalization and facilitation are extremely important. At the back of the room, please.
Thank you, Catherine Muller.
Sorry, we don't hear you yet.
Hello? Have I got the sound? Yes, thank you. Yes, Catherine Woolard from the European Council on Refugees and Exiles, and I touched upon some of those issues in the discussion yesterday. I just thank the panelists for this very pragmatic and informative session. Let me speak for one moment as an employer managing a small organisation. We've given up on the single permit system. Last time it took us 10 months to get a single permit for somebody who we'd offered a job to. At great cost, it's impossible. But I want to then ask about another pool of third country nationals who are present on the territory, who are asylum applicants. To try to make the bridge a bit between today and some of the discussions yesterday. I know it's a sensitive topic, but we are told on the one hand that there are huge numbers of those people arriving, most of whom will get a protection status. There are reforms coming that will make it harder to include asylum applicants and refugees. On the other hand, there is a change that means that member states now have a deadline of 3 months to be giving access to employment for people seeking asylum. Doesn't mean they have to give them a job, it means that they have to have access to the labour market. So do the panel see that we can put these two pieces together, or will this rather schizophrenic approach continue with restrictions towards some and a desperate search for bringing in others?
Thank you for that question. I think a lot of work is being done on complementary pathways. Member states still struggle to reconcile the protection and the labour dimension. I look to my panel. Would someone, Bianca?
Maybe I can quickly react. I hear what you are saying, that for the persons that are beneficiaries of international protection, often there are additional layers that they have to go through to access the labor market. And I understand that there is a variety of approaches. It is not as standardized or streamlined across the EU when it comes to the access to labor market as we might think. What came to my mind are some good practices that we are aware of, that where there is kind of a potential to scale up. There is, for instance, the Displaced Talent for Europe project, where companies are supported to recruit beneficiaries of international protection, also from third countries. Or I know of some good practices of chambers of commerce or business federations that provide guidelines or toolkits to the SMEs on how to onboard and recruit specific refugees. So I think there are some kind of practices in the field, but there is a need maybe to scale those up at a wider level.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we are out of time, but I always take the opportunity to abuse the microphone as the moderator. And just to summarize, I mean, I think it's clear that we need to digitize and modernize on the EU side. We need to work to develop even very fundamental checklists, guidelines for employers. We need to engage with the professional associations, the public employment services, and municipalities. There has been a recent piece of research undertaken by ICMPD on talent attraction and retention, and we really do see some pockets, some examples of great practice that could be replicated and emulated in other member states. Examples of international houses, or examples of public employment services doing more constructive engagement. So there are national level examples, regional and municipal. So please do have a look and see if there's something that resonates within your context for replication. And finally, if you have enjoyed this kind of practical operational discussion, then do please look for the Labour Mobility Practitioners Network, which is funded by DG Home. ICMPD is the secretariat, and we really do get into these nitty-gritty, more practical issues for the employers, for those designing labour schemes, etc. So check it out. Thank you very much to the panel today. We really have appreciated your expertise and your time. And thank you, the audience. There is a coffee break now. I am looking to Malin for how long we can offer. Great. Thank you, Malin. Thank you so much. Thank you.